Whoa. Okay, before you say I've already made this video, I did make a how to play Reanimator on a budget video. Honestly, it is similar to this video, but I feel like I missed a lot of the points I wanted to cover in that video. I know I made the video when I was like super excited and like in a super prolific state, which, you know, I miss some stuff when I'm like that. While this video is a full-on declaration of a new series here on the channel, where I will take a theme, in today's episode, Reanimator, and give you guys an in-depth look on how that strategy works using a $40 deck to show you how to build for the strategy on a budget and walk you through the ins and outs of playing that theme. So in today's video, we're going to be covering the following. What is Reanimator? Our $40 deck's overall strategy / commander, how our deck plans to fill our graveyard, whether that be mill, surveil, or discard, what we plan to fill our graveyard with, along with the importance of deck theme and creature selection, the use of sack outlets in Reanimator, how we reanimate, how we protect our game plan, whether that be shuffle from grave effects or punishment effects, win conditions for our deck, tips and tricks for running Reanimator, potential upgrades for this deck, along with gameplay. This video is for those of you that are not really familiar with the Reanimator strategy, you have been interested in it, but you kind of get turned off by the high prices of some of the Reanimator staples like Animate Dead or Dance of the Dead or Reanimate. This video will give you an all-around better understanding of Reanimator, how to build Reanimator decks, how to play Reanimator decks, what type of cards you should be looking for, while also staying on a budget. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I made this video pretty much for my brother. He's been kind of in and out when it comes to the game. There's been a couple of times where I can see that glint in his eye that I have where he's like, oh, I'm actually excited to play that. And seeing the fun side of Magic really click for somebody really is like such a cool thing for me. So that is the idea of this video. And after running this script past my brother, I can 100% say that by the end of this video, I will have convinced you to build Reanimator, how to play Reanimator, and I think you yourself are going to be wanting to look through your binders in your collection to build a Reanimator deck of your own. So with that, let's officially get into this video. Make sure to comment down below the next strategy or theme you would like me to talk about in this series, and let's go. What is Reanimator? Before anything, we need to answer the question, what is a Reanimator deck? Just broad strokes, sell you on the idea. What is the idea behind Reanimator? A Reanimator deck is about one thing above all else, our graveyard. These decks aim to fill their graveyards up with explosive, powerful creatures and use cards that can put creatures directly from grave into play, otherwise known as reanimation cards, to bring home games. This strategy gets its name from the card Reanimate, which is 1 black to bring something back from grave into play. If you like explosive decks and creatures, toolboxy strategies that often have an answer to most problems, and a super resilient game plan, Reanimator is the strategy for you. And if you like all of that plus never missing a land drop, then this $40 Necrobloom list we're going to be talking about today might be a great starting point on your reanimation journey. So full deck list for the deck we're going to be referencing in today's video down below so you can follow along, and let's do it. Our $40 deck's overall strategy / commander. Welcome to the $40 plant-based die-et Reanimator Primer. This deck and video are built to introduce players to the reanimation theme, to not only show a very powerful example of a theme on a budget, in this video, Reanimator. This deck will also serve as a visual, or should I say physical, representation of how one of these decks works and plays. Because yes, I built this one, so let's introduce the commander of this bad boy, the Necrobloom. The Necrobloom is a white, a black, and a green commander, which is actually very important as black and white are easily the best not only removal colors, but they're also the best colors for reanimation. Plus green is one of, if not the best color for big scary creatures that we can reanimate. Plus green's got mana ramp, which makes a great backup plan for a Reanimator deck, as late game we can just start hard casting some of our bombs. Anyways, the Necrobloom is 1, a white, a black, and a green for a 2/7 with a landfall, meaning whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we will create a 0/1 green plant token, unless we have 7 lands with different names. In that case, we make a 2/2 black zombie. Keep in mind, since this is a Reanimator list, this first part of Necrobloom is gonna be there to synergize with. We'll get into that more in depth later. The Necrobloom's second ability is where this becomes a really scary Reanimator deck, as the Necrobloom gives lands in our graveyard Dredge 2. But what is Dredge 2? When a card with Dredge is in our graveyard and you were to draw a card, instead of drawing that card, you may return the land with Dredge to your hand and mill 2 cards instead. So in the Necrobloom, for example, if we have an Evolving Wilds that we just sacrificed chilling in our graveyard and we go to draw a card, we can instead just pop that Evolving Wilds back into our hand and mill 2 cards. This makes lands that sack themselves very good. Plus, lands with cycling like Secluded Steppe that we can discard to draw, which, yes, that draw affects the land we just discarded, so we can dredge it. Very good. Keep in mind, if you've got 3 lands in your graveyard and you draw a card, you do not return all 3 to your hand and then dredge 6. You only get to return 1 land per card draw. So, the Necrobloom has a powerful token generation, land fall ability, and a dredge ability that will quickly fill up our graveyard. Let's get into the weeds and explain exactly why those are 2 great things, how we can interact with those, and how you should think about and go about building your own Reanimator deck or piloting a Reanimator deck. So piggybacking off of our land dredge discussion and how that's going to be providing a ton of self-mill, any good Reanimator deck needs plenty of ways to put creature cards into their graveyard. An important thing to keep in mind, the effects we run to get cards into our graveyard are going to need to be early game effects, so think 3 mana or less when it comes to cards like that. I like to run anywhere from 10 to 15 of these type effects in my deck, this deck in particular running 12, as the commander provides a ton of mill with the Dredge 2 ability. The first and most obvious way to fill up our graveyard is by putting cards directly from our library into our graveyard, otherwise known as milling ourselves. This can come in the form of one-time mill effects on instants and sorceries like Drown in Filth, putting the top 4 of our deck into our grave and giving a creature neg1 for each creature in our bin. Or something like Grisly Salvage, which lets us look at the top 5, put a creature or land from among them into our hand, and the rest into our graveyard. These types of spells are super efficient, reliable, super good way to fill up your graveyard with creatures, but these one-time self-mill effects aren't the only way. There's repeatable self-mill effects that will steadily fill up our graveyard on every one of our turns. Cards like Ripples of Undeath gives us a mill 3 on our pre-combat main phase that we can then pay 1 mana and 3 life to pick one of the 3 cards we milled and put it into our hand. So if you mill into a huge creature, a land, and a piece of reanimation, you can go ahead and pay 1, pay 3 life, pop that reanimation spell back into your hand, play it to get back the fat creature you just milled. Ripples is a serious threat in Reanimator, and it's one of the strongest cards. It had to be put in the list. We've also got cards like Perpetual Timepiece, which can tap to mill ourselves for 2, or we can pay 2, sack it, shuffle any number of cards from our graveyard back into our deck. We'll talk about that part more later. These provide a steady stream of self-mill, filling our graveyard with lands we can dredge thanks to our commander, or creatures we can reanimate for tons of value. Moving on from self-mill, another great way to fill our graveyard is by surveilling. The surveil mechanic lets us look at the top cards of our deck and lets us put any number of them back on top in any order and any number of them into our graveyard. So with a sorcery like Dire Sight, we surveil 2, draw 2, lose 2. It's a great way to not only set the top of your deck, draw cards, but also fill your grave. Or a creature like Sanguine Spy is great in Necrobloom specifically, as you can sack the tokens that Necrobloom makes to surveil 1, turning our commander in this into a little self-mill engine. The final way to get cards into your graveyard is by discarding them straight out of your hand. Now, with all the creature bombs that you run in a Reanimator deck, you're bound to have some of them stuck in hand, so cards like Key to the City lets us tap it, discard a card, make target creature unblockable until end of turn, which not only interacts with any big creatures we already have in play by making them unblockable, also lets us discard any big creatures we have stuck in hand. You've also got one-time use discard effects like Bitter Triumph, which is just a removal spell that has an additional cost of discarding a spell, but hey, discarding a big creature into your grave and then removing an opponent's big creature, that seems pretty great. And if you're looking for more targeted specific mill, there are some self-mill tutor cards like Buried Alive, which let you search for 3 creatures and put them into your graveyard. Luckily, this card's 90 cents and absolutely cracked, so yeah, it's in the list. And this seems like the best spot to bring up sack outlets. Another good way to get creatures that are already in play into the graveyard are sack outlets like Woe Strider, Sanguine Spy, Viscera Seer, which can all sack creatures to give you some kind of value. Now you might ask, why would we want to do this? Well, when you run creatures like Avenger of Zendikar, Bane of Progress, or Endray's Forerunner, all of which have powerful ETBs, once you reanimate them into play, it's always nice to be able to sacrifice them and then reanimate them again to use their ETB triggers again. And you really don't need a lot of these. I recommend running like 3 sack outlets, make sure like a couple of them are creatures, because your Reanimator, you're going to see those sack outlets in your graveyard at one point, and if you don't draw into them, you can just reanimate them to start getting value from them, in case you didn't take notes so far. 1. Any good Reanimator deck needs 10 to 15 effects that will help us fill our graveyard with creatures, along with 3 sack outlets. And 2, these self-mill effects can include Surveil, Discard, or Graveyard Tutor effects. With all this in mind, what are we putting in our graveyard? Well, this is where it gets really fun. We're putting huge creatures we get to cheat into play way earlier than they should be. But this is where we run into one of the first nuances of a Reanimator deck. A Reanimator deck isn't just straight up, I'm gonna cheat this big creature into play and win the game. I mean, sure, it can be, but that's just more of like a Reanimator good stuff deck, which is exactly my point. Your Reanimator deck, you're gonna have some kind of sub-theme with it that all your bombs are going to interact with, and your deck can really just start developing some synergy together. For example, the Necro Bloom clearly has some strong landfall interactions with its token creation. Not only this, but keep in mind that Dredge 2 that our commander gives our lands engrave. That means that a land we dredge gets put back to our hand, so we essentially will never miss a land drop in this deck. So the creature bombs we run in this specific list might want to interact with our commander's strengths, those being 1, our commander floods the board with tokens with landfall, and 2, our commander guarantees land drops on our turn. So let's look at our bomb creature selection for this list and see if they tie into one of, if not both of these commander synergies. First, we've got Glacier Godmaw being a 6/6 trample that creates a lander token on ETB, which can search for a land and put it into play, which interacts with our commander's landfall, while Glacier Godmaw also has a landfall trigger that buffs our entire board with a +1/+0 until end of turn, which can also synergize with our commander's guaranteed land drops each turn as well as the tokens, so that definitely checks both boxes. Sun Titan is a 6/6 vigilance that will reanimate a permanent that costs 3 or less when it enters or attacks, which can reanimate some great toolbox pieces that we'll get into later, but Sun Titan's ability can also grab lands out of graveyard, which definitely synergizes with our commander and our deck's landfall interaction. Endray's Forerunners provides a board-wide buff and trample, which interacts with our commander's token creation. Butcher of Malakar can turn any of our creatures dying into each opponent needing to sacrifice a creature, which, as you'll see later, is really gross in a Reanimator deck, especially this one. Rampaging Balos has a landfall trigger that makes 4/4 Beast, which, yeah, that's going to be pretty good in a deck that has a guaranteed land drop each turn. What about Avenger of Zendikar? Make a board full of 0/1s when it enters the battlefield equal to the number of lands we control, and whenever a land ETBs, we put a 1/1 counter on each plant we control, which, keep in mind, our commander also makes plants, so extra good there. Shadrick's Silverquill gives us a lot of options for value that include making tokens, drawing cards, and putting 1/1 counters on our full board, which again, with our commander's token creation, seems pretty good. The Gitrog Monster, it's a 6/6 Death Touch that has us sack a land on our upkeep, which will help initiate our land dredge from graveyard. Lets us play an extra land each turn, which is great for our landfall effects. And it also lets us draw a card whenever a land goes to our graveyard from anywhere. Jarad Golgari Lichlord is a 2/2 that gets +1/+1 for each creature in our graveyard, which interacts with the land dredge ability. We can also sack a creature to have each opponent lose life equal to the creature's power, or sacrifice a swamp and a forest when Jarad is in the graveyard to return it to our hand, which is a nice way to get some lands into the graveyard to get the dredge going. Past this, there are some straight up bombs that don't necessarily fit into the synergistic mold, so cards like Bane of Progress, in all honesty, don't interact with the deck's overall strategy. More so, it's a big bomb that destroys all artifacts and enchantments. This deck doesn't run that many artifacts and enchantments. It's also on a creature, so we can recur this whenever we need a board wipe for artifacts and enchantments. So consider this more so a board wipe than a bomb, although it's really big. Similarly, Noxious Gearhulk, much like Bane of Progress, is a big creature that acts more like a piece of removal or a toolbox piece rather than a bomb, although it is a big menace creature, so yeah, again, kinda. Lord of Extinction is one of my favorites. This is just a straight up 5-drop creature that's power and toughness is equal to the number of cards in everyone's graveyards, which, yes, gets gross. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And finally, Sir Conrad deals damage to the opponents when creatures enter our graveyard from anywhere or leave our graveyard, which not only will do tons of damage in this deck, and we'll get into that as well later. You can also just pay 1 and a black to mill a card with Sir Conrad, so this card's really no harm, no foul in a Reanimator deck. Super good. Again, if you haven't been taking notes, let's retrack. 1. Any good Reanimator deck needs 10 to 15 effects that will help us fill our grave. 2. These can include self-mill, surveil, discard, and graveyard tutor effects. 3. Choose what your Reanimator deck's sub-theme is and how the creatures you plan to reanimate can synergize with it. And 4. Run 10 to 15 of these bomb creatures that we can mill into. With all that in mind, it's time to move on to the deck's namesake, the Reanimation. How are we going to get these big bombs back into play? Turns out that even on a budget, tons of good ways. As far as ways to bring creatures back from our graveyard directly into play, we've got one-time use reanimation effects like the death side of Life and Death, letting us reanimate a creature directly into play for 1 and a black and lose life equal to CMC. Persist lets us reanimate a non-legendary creature from our graveyard and put a -1/-1 counter on it, which, like, yeah, I'll take a 4/4 Avenger Zendikar for 2 mana, sure. Victimize is a great reanimator option, specifically in this deck, as we can sack a creature to reanimate 2 creatures into play tapped. So yeah, crack one of your little plant tokens, get 2 bombs into play for 3 mana. But that's nothing compared to Lich Knight's Conquest in this deck. This 4 and a black sorcery lets us sack any number of artifacts, enchantments, or tokens, you say? Yeah. We can crack like 5 of our tokens our commander has made, and then reanimate 5 creatures from our graveyard. Actually gross. Of course, the deck runs Phyrexian Delver and Karmic Guide, which are both creatures that when they ETB, reanimate a creature. Past these single-use reanimation effects, we've got plenty of repeatable forms of reanimation. And yeah, it's just as broken as it sounds. Cards like Priest of Fellrites can sack to return a creature, as well as having Unearth to do it again. Similarly, Unburial Rites is a 5-drop reanimation spell with flashback. Whisper Blood Liturgist lets us tap and sack 2 creatures to reanimate something, which again becomes busted when we have all these tokens in play. Sun Titan can reanimate 3 or less CMC permanents on ETB or attack, which interacts great with utility creatures like Chomping Changeling or Morbid Opportunist to provide us with some utility when we need it. Dread Return is a 4-drop sorcery that will reanimate a creature, but it's also got flashback by sacking 3 creatures. So again, with our commander making all these tokens, we can utilize this super easily. Rite of Return is a 5-drop sorcery that reanimates a creature, and we can also encode it onto a creature after we cast it, meaning whenever the creature we encoded it onto deals damage to an opponent, we can cast a copy of Rite of Return for free. Marin of Clennail Toth is a creature that gives us, the player, experience counters whenever a creature we control dies. At the beginning of our end step, we can choose a creature in our graveyard. If that creature's CMC is equal to or less than the amount of experience counters we have, we can put it into play. If we don't put it into play, or its mana cost is more than the amount of experience counters we have, we can put it into our hand, which interacts great with all the tokens we have that are definitely going to be hitting the bin. And finally, we run Imria Shepherd, which turns every landfall into a creature coming back to our hand, but if that land was a plains, it comes back into play, which in a deck where you can play Evolving Wilds, sacrifice it for a plains, and then the next time you draw, instead dredge that Evolving Wilds back to your hand, play it as your land for turn, crack it, search for a plains. That seems extra good. So now that we've got the reanimation laid out, I want to talk about 2 terms that honestly I just made up that you need to understand when you're playing reanimation. Those terms are reanimation chains and graveyard chains. So let's cover reanimation chains first. A reanimation chain is a series of reanimation targets that results in multiple creatures reanimating each other into play. So for example, if we play Persist, which can return a non-legendary creature from our graveyard into play with a -1/-1 counter on it, and we target our Karmic Guide, that Karmic Guide will enter the battlefield and trigger its ETB ability to return a creature from our graveyard into play. We could then, theoretically, target a creature like Phyrexian Delver, which, you guessed it, enters and reanimates another thing. That Delver can target something like Imria Shepherd. When Imria Shepherd enters, we could go ahead and play our land for turn of a plains, or again, the whole Evolving Wilds search for a plains game plan, either way. To trigger the Imria Shepherd to reanimate another creature, that creature could be Sun Titan, which could enter and grab a 3 CMC or less permanent like, I don't know, a Priest of Fellrites that can sack to reanimate. You see what I'm saying? Reanimation chains are incredibly powerful, and knowing when you have these lines in your graveyard can get you potentially upwards of 20, 30 power on the board for what started as paying 2 mana. And these chains can be as long or as short as you want. Just keep in mind, if you're going to reanimate that big thing, make sure there's nothing else in your grave that you could reanimate first that'll just grab you that big thing anyway. So understanding that's really important. The next thing you gotta understand that's important are graveyard chains. Graveyard chains are a must in a reanimator deck as the answer to the question, what if we mill into all of our reanimation pieces? Well, graveyard chain cards like Priest of Fellrites with its Unearth, Unburial Rites with its flashback, or Dread Return with its flashback can all be cast from our graveyard to then jumpstart one of the reanimation chains we talked about before. And something as simple as running 3 pieces of these graveyard chains in your deck is going to make your deck feel way better. Reanimation decks have a lot of self-mill. You're gonna see a lot of your deck, and if you just see one of these pieces that you can cast from graveyard, all of a sudden, all your reanimation comes back. It's pretty great. So let's say all your good reanimation pieces are stuck in your graveyard. You go to draw a card, your Necrobloom's Dredge triggers, instead you put a land from your graveyard back into hand, you mill 2 cards, and look at that, you just milled into a Dread Return, which has a flashback to sack 3 creatures. Well, we got 3 plant tokens right here from our Necrobloom. Let's go ahead and crack those plants to flashback Dread Return. Dread Return is going to target Karmic Guide. Phyrexian Delver, Emeria Shepherd, any of the stuff we talked about before, jumpstart your whole reanimation chain. Super, super good. And again, 3 of these cards in your deck seriously will change how you feel about reanimation decks and how they play. I promise. They will save your ass more times than I could ever convince you of. So at this point, I'm just going to assume you're not taking notes, so let's summarize. 1. Any good Reanimator deck needs 10 to 15 effects that will help us fill our graveyard. 2. These can include effects like Self-Mill, Surveil, Discard, and Grave Tutor effects. 3. Choose what your reanimation deck's sub-theme is, and how the creature bombs you plan to reanimate can synergize with it. 4. Run 10 to 15 of these bomb creatures that we can mill into. 5. Run 10 to 15 pieces of reanimation. And 6. Make 3 pieces of this reanimation graveyard chain pieces that can be cast from grave. So with the reanimation chains and the graveyard chains and all this and fresh in your mind, how do we protect this strategy? Because the strategy seems really strong. It seems really powerful. You can do a lot of cool stuff. But what happens when someone drops a Bajuka Bog? Or what happens when someone drops a Rest in Peace? As far as I'm concerned, there are 2 cards that I recommend every reanimation deck run. And they've pretty much covered this problem for me. Now, some people will tell you to run hexproof in a reanimator deck, like cards that give the player itself hexproof, because a lot of the cards that exile graveyards exile target player's graveyard, and that is good advice. I also find personally that those hexproof cards kind of clunk up the deck building process. What I recommend is running these 2 cards instead. The first card is Perpetual Timepiece, and we already talked about this one. You can tap it, mill 2, you can pay 2, exile it, shuffle any number of cards from your graveyard back into your deck. This is a great one because it is going to be a mill engine. We need those in the deck anyway. But the pay 2, exile, and shuffle any number of cards into our deck, that's a great response to someone trying to exile our graveyard. Someone plays Bajuka Bog and tries to take out our 30 deep graveyard, let's say. In response, you exile your Perpetual Timepiece, you shuffle every bit of important cardage in there that you want back into your list, and then game plan is normal. Keep milling yourself with your dredge and your self-mill effects, reanimate your bombs back into play. That Bajuka Bog, sure, slowed you down, didn't completely destroy your strategy now. Card number 2, Sir Conrad, is a very good deterrent for people trying to shut down a graveyard strategy, because whenever a creature, sure, enters the graveyard, they'll lose life. More importantly, whenever a creature leaves the graveyard, they'll lose life. So if we have a big enough graveyard and someone tries to exile that graveyard, they're going to have to consider how many creatures are in that graveyard, because Sir Conrad's going to do however big that number is to all of us once I exile it, because exiling creatures from a graveyard counts as those creatures leaving the graveyard. So you want to protect your Reanimator deck, run those 2 cards. If you're in Reanimator, you're going to be running black, so you can run Sir Conrad, and Perpetual Timepiece is an artifact, so run them. So rule number 7, run Sir Conrad and Perpetual Timepiece. Moving on. So with that, we're done with the basics of this reanimation list and how you should go about piloting and building your own reanimation list. But now we get to talk about the fun stuff. We get to talk about the win conditions, some of my tips and tricks, and look at some gameplay for the deck. So let's do it. Starting with this deck's win conditions to give you an idea of some of the cool ways you can win in a Reanimator list. Win con number 1, ladies and gentlemen, is called the Boomer Blast. This win condition relies on us having a Lord of Extinction in play, which scales with every card in every graveyard, that's big enough to sacrifice to our Gerard Golgari Lich Lord to drain each opponent for a massive amount of life, hopefully enough to take them out. Not even hopefully. If that person's got 6 cards, that person has 4, that person has 10, and you have 20, congratulations. That's enough to kill every single person at the table. Win con number 2 is called the Shuffle Shambler. This win condition relies on us having a graveyard full of creatures, along with Sir Conrad's ability to ping when a creature leaves our graveyard, paired with Perpetual Timepiece to shuffle enough creatures from our graveyard to take out the opponents. Keep in mind, this is gonna require the opponents have already taken some damage, because exiling 40 creatures out of your graveyard to KO everybody one-shot style, gonna be a little difficult. Win con number 3 is, I don't really have a fancy name for this one, because it's just reanimating Endray's Forerunner when you have enough tokens in play to bash the opponent's face in. Sometimes it's just straight up Oonga Boonga, I got the club in my hand, you're going down. Win con number 4 is called Day of the Dead. This win condition requires we control a decent amount of tokens from our commander, a grave full of creatures, along with controlling a Butcher of Malakar. We then need to play a Lich Knight's Conquest from our hand, which lets us sacrifice any number of tokens to reanimate that many creatures. We sacrifice all of our plant tokens, reanimate a graveyard full of bombs, and when we sack those tokens, Butcher of Malakir will cause each opponent to sack that many creatures, essentially wiping the opponent's board while flooding your board with all of your bombs. GG. And finally, our 5th win con in this deck is called Drown and Sill. This win condition requires us to have a graveyard full of lands, a few decent landfall effects like Avenger of Zendikar, which can buff our plant tokens, or Obnixilis, which can drain opponents for 3 when a land enters. And we need to cast a spell like Splendid Reclamation or Aftermath Analyst, which will bring back every land from our grave into play, triggering a mass of landfall effects. Should be able to bring it home from there. So outside of just playing massive land interaction creatures in this deck and having some crazy synergy and value and big bodies coming out earlier than expected, there are definitely some straightforward win conditions that you can set to just bring home games in this list, which hopefully also opened your eyes up to how cool some win conditions in Reanimator can be. But that's not it. I've also got some additional just tips and tricks, interactions that I've liked that I will dish out to you for free ski. Just hit the subscribe button. That's all I ask. One of my favorite pieces of tech is the Sun Titan lock. So if your Reanimator deck runs white as well, you can run Sun Titan along with a creature like Selfless Spirit, which you can sacrifice to give your board indestructible, to essentially have your board never be able to be blown up by destroy effects, because every time they try, you just sack Selfless Spirit, and every time it's your turn, you swing with Sun Titan and you bring back the spirit. Super annoying. It protects all your big bombs you're reanimating. It's actually really nice. How about this? You want to take all the lands out of your deck on one turn? Cool, let's do it. The first thing you're going to need is an Evolving Wild style land in your graveyard. Then once you reach enough creatures on board, we can reanimate a Steward of the Harvest to exile our Evolving Wilds. Now all of our creatures are Evolving Wilds. So go ahead and filter all of the basic lands out of your deck, get a ton of sacrifice triggers, go absolutely crazy. This is great, and like I've come to find out, a lot of different decks, but specifically in the Necrobloom as well. It's in here. It's really gross. Oh, you know that whole Lord of Extinction thing we just talked about, where it gets huge and you sack it to your Gerard to do damage to everybody? My favorite thing to do is pair that with Altar of Dementia and just mill somebody out. Thought I'd sprinkle that in here for you. Take that if you want. Keep in mind, your graveyard is like a second hand, and a lot of the time you can find a way to get the card you need, even if it's a non-creature card. Because most of the time you can just find a reanimation chain and then end that chain on an Internal Witness or something like that to grab the card you need out of graveyard. In Reanimator, there's like a 99% chance there's a line you're not seeing that can get you the thing you want, and that's why I really like this theme a lot. Now, before we get into the actual gameplay of this deck, just kind of showing it off a bit here, I want to bring up a couple of upgrades. So if you're considering building this deck and you got a little cash to upgrade it a bit, here's what I think. Obviously, the Surveil lands are going to be good as they just enter and help fill our graveyard. So yeah, Fauna Shaman is a great piece of discard because you can just discard a big creature out of your hand and tutor another creature out of your deck to replace it with. This thing is essentially just a big creature fill grave engine, and we love it. As far as large creature bomb upgrades are concerned, we're going to start with a small creature, weirdly enough, Springheart Nantuko, providing a token creation ability on landfall, which interacts with the commander to just pretty much be a second commander. Or when it's bestowed onto a creature, which means just enchanted to it like an aura, we can make copies of the creature it's bestowed onto whenever we play a land, which in this deck gets gross again. Maybe an Avenger of Zendikar every time you play a land? Sure. Icetail Explorer is another insane creature in this list, but I still haven't even gotten one of these for my Taval deck, so don't feel too bad. Letting us play additional lands on our turn, play lands from our graveyard, and mill a card whenever a land comes into play. Absolute menace of a card. Or how about Colossal Grave Reaver? This thing's literally $6, and it's a 7-drop, 7/6 flyer that mills 3 on ETB, mills 3 on attack, and whenever we mill a creature, we get to put it into play. Yeah, disgusting. Remember Springheart Nantuko we were just talking about? What if you bestowed it onto this guy? Start making Grave Reaver copies every time you play a land. Pretty gnarly. And as far as sack outlets are concerned, I would definitely put an Altar of Dementia in this list and an Ashnod's Altar, providing mill and mana ramp on a sack outlet. Gonna interact with all the tokens in here, gonna interact with being able to cycle bomb creatures in and out of grave. These are no-brainers in these decks. And with that, we have arrived at the gameplay section. I'll see you out there on the battlefield.
So that's what? Yeah. Wait a minute. Oh, dude. Yes, okay. Oh, shit. I just realized. I was like, that art looks cool. There's 2 sungrass berries. Crazy, dude. So I'm gonna get my 1/1. Oh, and actually, he might be a zombie now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
close.
6. Close.
Next turn.
And then I get
Yes, sir.
draw a card.
Yep.
And then instead of drawing, I think I'm gonna return this to my hand. Hey! Come on, another land, baby! This is pretty freaking sweet. Oh, this is cool, dude! Damn, this is crazy!
Coolest deck I've ever seen.
Alright, so we're over on the $40 intro to Reanimator deck list over on Moxfield. You can check out the full deck list down in the description using the Moxfield link. We're going to go ahead and scroll down, dish out a hand, and I'll show you how it's done piloting a Reanimator deck. Wow, that's a stinker. Good thing we're going to dish out another one. And that one is much better. We're going to go ahead and play test it. So on our first turn, we're going to go ahead and draw. We're going to then play a Sun Petal Grove tapped and pass back around. When it comes back around to us, we'll play a Verdescent Bog, followed by a Rampant Growth. Rampant Growth is going to grab us a Plains. We'll go ahead and pass. When it comes back around to us, we will draw, play an Ashen Barrens, and then go ahead and pay 1, a green, a white, and a black for a Necro Bloom. So when it comes back around to us now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pay 1 to filter Verdescent Bog into a black and a green. We're going to use the black to cycle a Barren Moor, which means we discard it, and then we draw a card. So when we draw a card, we're going to trigger the Land Dredge 2 ability to return the very same Barren Moor we cycled to mill 2 cards, which are Secluded Steppe and Rampaging Baloths. We're going to follow this up with a Key to the City, and then playing a Barren Moor for our land for turn tapped, and I think we're looking good. We're going to go ahead and pass on that after we get our little plant token. When it comes back around to us, when we draw our card for turn, we do have the option to Dredge 2 with our Secluded Steppe and Graveyard, which I think I'm going to do, seeing as we have Persist in hand. I'm going to go ahead and stick Secluded Steppe back into my graveyard instead of drawing, mill 2 cards, which is Buried Alive and Woodland Cemetery. We're then going to play 1 and a black to Persist, return target non-legendary creature from our graveyard with a -1/-1 counter. That will target our Rampaging Baloths. We are then going to play our Secluded Steppe as our land for turn to trigger our landfall ability on Necro Bloom and Baloths, so we'll get another 0/1 plant, as well as a 4/4 Beast. Drop a Wayfarer's Bauble, and then crack the Bauble to get another basic land into play. That gives us another plant and another beast. And yeah, we're looking pretty okay. I think we're safe passing the turn right there. And as you can see, we're pretty set up to win right now. Oh, look at that, a Phyrexian Delver. So on this turn, what we can do is go ahead and tap our Key to the City, discard a card up to 1 target creature can't be blocked this turn. I guess I'll discard Shadrix. That seems pretty good. I will then pay 3 and 2 black for a Phyrexian Delver. When it enters, I get to reanimate a creature from my graveyard and lose life equal to the CMC. I'm going to reanimate Shadrix and lose 5. Then we'll move to combat. During combat, I can have target player do one of these do one of the 3 choices on Shadrix, and then I get to do another one. So I'll have my opponent draw a card, and I will put a 1/1 counter on my full board for 18 damage. Yeah, and we're looking pretty good. I got a Get Rog Monster in hand, a Dire Sight. We're going to fill our hand back up nicely and continue on for there. That one's way too risky. I can't do that one either. There we go. I can keep that one. Turn 1, we go ahead and draw. We're gonna play a we're gonna play a Sun Petal Grove tapped. Pass back around. We will go ahead and play a Swamp to drop a Viscera Seer. Pass back around. Play a Brushland. We'll play 1, a green, and a black for Grist the Hunger Tide. We will +1 Grist to mill a card, milling Phyrexian Delver, and creating a 1/1 insect. We'll pass. Before it comes back to us, we're going to sack our insect to Viscera Seer to scry 1. We got a Dire Sight on top. I am fine with keeping that there. So we'll start our turn and draw into our Dire Sight here. See if we can hit a different land besides Tranquil Thicket so we can keep the cycling play with our commander open. So we'll play Dire Sight, Surveil 2, then draw 2, then lose 2. Surveil a Persist and a Karmic Guide. I'm going to go ahead and put the Persist back on top, Karmic Guide in the grave, and then draw 2. We hit the land 2, boys. So we will play the land for turn. And yeah, I'm feeling pretty good right now. We're going to go ahead and +1 Grist to mill a card. We're milling a Stitcher Supplier. Go ahead and get an insect token. And pass. Again, before it comes back to us, we're going to sack this insect to scry 1. Sanguine Spy on top. I'm fine with keeping Sanguine Spy there. Go ahead and draw into the Sanguine Spy. Then we will pay 1 and a black. Persist. Return target creature. That's not legendary from the grave with a -1/-1 counter on it. And we're going to grab Karmic Guide, and when Karmic Guide enters, that's going to grab Phyrexian Delver, and when Phyrexian Delver enters, that's going to grab Stitcher Supplier. So when Stitcher Supplier enters, that'll mill us 3 cards. End raise Forerunners, Sun Titan, Vernon Fen, sure. What we're going to do now is use Viscera Seer to sacrifice Stitcher Supplier to mill 3 cards. Bane of Progress, Meteor Golem, Plains. And then we're going to pay 1 and a black to use the Death Side of Life and Death. Return target creature from your graveyard and lose life equal to its CMC to return a Sun Titan. And when Sun Titan enters, he is going to return a Stitcher Supplier. Stitcher Supplier enters, mills us 3. Tread Return, Feed the Swarm, Tainted Wood. We'll go ahead and flash back Dread Return by sacking 3 creatures. We'll sack Karmic Guide, Phyrexian Delver, and Stitcher Supplier. And when Stitcher Supplier dies, we mill 3 cards. Avenger, Woe Strider, Swamp, sure. Dread Return triggers. We're going to go ahead and Dread Return gets played, and we will return a creature from our graveyard. That will be Phyrexian Delver. Phyrexian Delver will grab Karmic Guide, and Karmic Guide will grab Bane of Progress to wipe all the artifacts and enchantments off of all the opponent's boards. And I really don't feel like I have to go on. This is a very good showing of what Reanimator is supposed to feel like and do. And it's pretty good, no? And with that, we finished up the video. I hope this was pretty good. I put a ton of work into this video. I hope you can notice that. And I'm very excited to move on and make the next one of these videos for the next strategy you guys are interested in. So comment down below what strategy or theme you would like me to make the $40 budget intro primer video for, and I'll get right on it for you. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. If you want to show me some additional support, you can head over to the YouTube members page or the Patreon members page. The links are down below, and the membership starts as low as $1 a month, and it seriously does help me out a ton. But not only me, you can also submit your commander decks for Friday night deck reviews with the commander deck submission form you gain access to on the membership page. So if that sounds interesting, be sure to check those out. Huge thanks to all the patrons you can see on screen, and I will see you guys on Friday. Peace.